When you download the iHeartRadio app and put the W. Dean Shook Show on your list of stations, you will prove to the world that you're a little bit smarter than everyone else. The W. Dean Shook Show, your connection to the signs of the times.
Now, you have a source for the truth in the news. W. Dean Shook, End Time News. Your connection to the signs of the times.
And welcome to this edition of End Time News. I am your host, W. Dean Shook, bringing you the stories and the truth the mainstream media is never going to tell you. And I want to start with one I found in Breitbart News. The Obama administration is reportedly attempting to bypass congressional ratification for an international move called a sweeping international climate change agreement. The president has hit on the perfect solution. Obama plans to bypass the democratic process, override all of those pesky checks and balances, and railroad through the legislation anyway by appealing to a higher power, a higher authority, that's right, the United Nations. Now, according to the New York Times, President Obama's climate negotiators are devising what they call a politically binding deal that would name and shame countries into cutting their emissions. The deal is likely to face strong objections from Republicans on Capitol Hill and from poor countries around the world. But negotiators say it's the only realistic path. Now, if you want a deal that includes all of the major emitters, including the U.S., you cannot realistically pursue a legally binding treaty at this time, said Paul Bledsoe, who's a top climate change official in the Clinton administration, who works closely with the Obama White House on international climate change policy. Lawmakers in both parties on Capitol Hill say there's no chance that the currently gridlocked Senate will ratify a climate change treaty in the near future, especially in a political environment where many Republican lawmakers still remain skeptical of the quote-unquote established science of human-caused global warming. Now, the article provides useful insight into the mentality of the kind of people who are pushing for this legislation. First, they're determined to misrepresent this as a party political issue in which arrogant, ideologically motivated, big oil-funded Republicans and denialists are willfully and perversely obstructing the perfectly sensible climate policies fully supported by all Democrats. Well, this wasn't true in 1997 when the Senate voted down the first attempt at a binding international climate treaty that was Kyoto. It was voted down 95-0, and it isn't true today. Second, it refers to the established climate science as if, to quote Al Gore, the science in global warming was settled. Well, this was a risible notion even at the time of the global warming scare back in 1992 during the Rio Earth Summit, when for a period of time global mean temperatures were actually rising. But scientists couldn't agree why. It's even less plausible now, given that as all halfway serious scientists, alarmists and realists alike, now acknowledge there's been no global warming in over 17 years. So what exactly does the president think he's playing at? Well, you can read this full story at wdeanshook.com, and I'll tell you right now, it's well worth the read. So since we're on the subject of President Obama, he has plans for an executive order on immigration by the end of summer. Here's what Alabama Representative Jeff Sessions said. Recent reports have said that the White House could move to enact unilateral legalization and work authorizations for some 5 million undocumented immigrants. And White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest indicated Monday the White House could make an announcement about the executive action at the end of the summer. As a result of this executive amnesty, millions here legally would be able to compete for any job in America, taking jobs needed by American workers, Sessions said in a Wednesday statement. We further know that these executive actions will likely also take a massive importation of new foreign workers on top of the large existing flow to take even more jobs in the United States, he added. The results would be disastrous for struggling workers. coming on the heels of 4 decades of continued record immigration to the U.S., coinciding with falling wages and shrinking middle class, according to Sessions, a senior member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. The fact that Ernest implied that Obama will be moving forward with these executive actions at the end of the summer, and the silence from Senate Democrats has been astounding. The roaring silence from Senate Democrats in the face of a clear and present danger facing their constituents, he said. They have refused to support the White House-passed legislation to block the president's amnesty actions, surrendering the Senate and their citizen constituents to an unconstitutional scheme to nullify American sovereignty, laws, and sovereign borders. You can also see that full story at wdeanshook.com. I'll be right back right after this break.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. These are the stakes. We either stand up to supporters of terrorism, or we and our allies risk losing the freedom we cherish. We must not let the jihadist government of Iran get a nuclear bomb. President Obama has had opportunity to stop them, but he's failing. Join with us and let's secure America now.
You know, seems these days that not a single one of us steps on a train, boards an airplane, attends a concert or a sporting event, and doesn't have at least a fleeting concern that terror could strike. The reality of the post-9/11 world is that we're at war, and we are a target. We all live with some level of uncertainty and fear. It's easy to lose sight of an issue that defines our generation, the need to stop terrorism in our time. Our president apologizes for America, and he's made it clear that the era of American exceptionalism is over. He campaigned on closing Guantanamo and trying terrorists in civilian court. On his second day in office, he stopped enhanced interrogation and he closed down the black sites. You know, where we got the intel that ultimately led us to bin Laden? He has all but abandoned Israel despite the fact that Iran is the world's leading sponsor of terror, that openly calls for the annihilation of Israel, all while Iran develops a nuclear bomb that they recently announced could be delivered to U.S. targets via missiles developed during Obama's presidency, while he does nothing but talk. The question for every American is simply, are we safer? AreWeSafer.com provides you with the facts and the potential consequences of these failed policies so that you can make informed decisions. I mean, let's face it. If things don't change, everything will change. And we all hope that day never comes.
And another federal judge defends the Constitution. That's right, federal judge strikes down ban on guns in bars and bar parking lots. On August 25th, Chief Justice U.S. District Judge Brian Jackson issued an order striking down a Baton Rouge ordinance that was banning guns in bars and the parking lot of bars, including other places that sell alcohol like restaurants and grocery stores. The decision was the result of a case brought by Ernest Taylor, who was pulled over around 1:30 a.m. on October 13, 2012, and arrested for having 2 rifles in his car while in the Romero's Lounge parking lot. Now, Taylor was told he was in violation of a new law, which barred the possession of firearms in or around a business that sells alcohol, and the rifles were taken from him. On August 25th, Judge Jackson not only struck down the ordinance against guns in bars and parking lots of establishments that sell alcohol, but also ordered the rifles returned to Taylor along with monetary damages. The amount Taylor will receive is to be decided in another hearing. Jackson permanently barred the city, the police chief, city attorneys, and arresting officers from enforcing the ordinance in the future. Why? Because it's clearly unconstitutional. And I want to address another issue. Are you someone who doesn't like the idea of Common Core? You know, Common Core has become very unpopular since the details of exactly what it is and how it works has come out. Well, now parents can be taught how to get their kids out of Common Core. The Common Core school standards imposed on teachers by Washington bureaucrats have been rejected by multiple states. It's been targeted by lawsuits and criticized as more indoctrination than education. Now, parents are being given a turn to take a whack at the one-size-fits-all program that regulates George Washington to a half a sentence and compares the Declaration of Independence to a high school romance breakup letter. The Michigan-based Thomas More Law Center is urging parents to opt their children out of the restrictive regulations and requirements, providing forms to make the process easier. The opt-out form is based on the constitutionally recognized fundamental rights of parents to direct the education of their children and on federal statutes which were designed to protect student privacy. This said by Richard Thompson, the chief counsel for the organization. He went on to say, "Our founding fathers recognized the danger to our freedom imposed by centralized control over public education. However, today, all but a handful of state governments, enticed by millions of dollars in federal grants, are voluntarily inviting the federal government to take control of our schools, imposing untested educational standards, and obtaining personal information on children and their parents, which would make any totalitarian government blush with envy," he continued. "We must ever keep in mind the philosophy of classroom in one generation will become the philosophy of the government in the next. Clearly, Common Core is a threat to individual privacy and liberty and to our constitutional republic," he said. His group has posted online a sample form to help parents meet the requirements of Michigan state law, where Thomas More is located. The group suggests it can be used as a template by attorneys preparing similar forms in other states. Above a line for the parent signature states, "In accordance with the fundamental constitutional rights of parents and legal guardians to determine and direct the care, teaching, and education of their children, and the relevant state and federal issues, I hereby request my child be exempt and excused from the school year from the following check-marked activities." There are options to exempt a student from any and all standardized testing or activities required by law under which individual students' data are collected and or shared with federal government and other entities outside the local school district, or are used for the purpose of school, student, or teacher accountability, including, but not by way of limitation, to academic achievement and annual tests, statewide performance assessments and Common Core state standards, aligned assessments, pilots, computer adaptive testing and assignments designed by Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium, or Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. Now, I know that sounds like a mouthful, but when you see the form, you'll understand it a little better. There's also an exemption for test assessments or surveys not limited solely to proficiency in core academic subjects. Other checkbox options include states that measures values, attitudes, or beliefs, as well as any survey, analysis, or evaluation that reveals information concerning my child, myself, or other members of my family. Now that sounds reasonable. Such information could relate to political affiliations or beliefs, mental or psychological problems, sexual behaviors or attitudes, legally recognized privileged or relationships such as those of lawyers and physicians and ministers and religious practices or income. This forbids the collection, tracking, housing, reporting, selling, or sharing with any party outside the local school district of non-educational related information on my child or my family, including but not limited to religion, political affiliation, biometric data, psychiatric data, and medical information. Biometric data includes fingerprints, retina, iris patterns, voice patterns, DNA sequencing, facial characteristics, handwriting, or any other unique physically identifying traits. Psychometric data, including but is not limited to personal traits, attitudes, abilities, aptitudes, social and emotional development tendencies, inclination, interests, or motivations. Now, if you'd like a copy of this, all you have to do is send me an email at wdeanshook.com, and I will gladly send you a copy of this form. Now, if you don't remember the email address, you can come to the website. That's wdeanshook.com, and on the front page, there's a contact form. Just put in that contact form that you would like a copy of the Common Core opt-out form. Within the week, I will email you a copy of this. That's at wdeanshook.com. And while you're there, don't forget this program stays alive through our sponsors and through our affiliates. GoDaddy.com is one of our main ones where you can get your own domain name for as little as $4.99 a year. If you go to the checkbox at the bottom of the homepage at wdeanshook.com, put in the search for the name you want for as little as $4.99 a year. It can be yours. You can have your own personalized email, your own domain name. Please help sponsor this program. Visit our sponsors.
Do you think the media is biased? Maybe they're leaving something out, or there's something they're not telling you. Now, you have a source for the truth in the news. W. Dean Shook, End Time News. Your connection to the signs of the times.
And as usual, when the smoke clears and the dust settles, I'll see you on our next program. Thank you so very much for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. I see you on our next update.
You can get these full stories and more at wdeanshook.com. That's wdeanshook.com.